I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey y'all, I'm Molly Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where we cover some pretty scandalous crimes and cases, as you know, that bubble up right here in Northwest Florida, and some cases beyond, because they all connect and they have similar themes. And joining me as always is Pam Hill, pharmacist and victims advocate, to talk about some of these what the feezy cases. And this is another what the feezy case. You know, coming off the heels, I should say, of the Sandra Birchmore case, the young woman who is caused quite the stir, the investigation into her death up in Massachusetts, because she had basically essentially been passed around, according to investigators, by police up there. And so they're looking into whether or not one of them may have had something to do with her death and how she even got to this point. But in keeping of this cops behaving badly theme, this is another case that just recently popped up out of Illinois, and a woman named Sonya Massey was shot in the face by a sheriff's deputy there when she called for help for a prowler, and he shot her in the face because she was holding a pot of boiling water, which he asked her to take care of. So anyway, that's just a little teaser for what we're talking about. But before we get into it, we have been following a couple of other cases too. We want to kind of update that. You call it Suitcase Sarah.
That's who I call her, Suitcase Sarah Boone, who put her boyfriend, Jorge, in a suitcase and left him there to die. And so now she's wondering why she's charged with murder, and she's gone through 8 attorneys. I mean, if you watch anything on TV, any kind of court cases, you've seen her. This has taken 4 years, but Suitcase Sarah, she decided, the judge told her, you know what, we're done playing all this with you, all these lawyers with you. You are going to represent yourself. You're pro se. So she's kind of like, wait, what? I mean, she got called on her stuff. So she's resourceful. Remember, she said, I'm excellent mother, and I make all A's and B's, and I'm good at everything I do.
Right,
Remember
that's
that?
her story, yes. And she's pretty good at making flyers.
There you go, show them that flyer. She made a flyer. That one's got all the green. I guess I'm wearing this shirt in honor of her. Same kind of green. But I looked at that and I was like, is that the McGuire's Irish Pub menu?
It looks like a flyer for the McGuire's Irish Run, doesn't it? The 5K. But it says, inmate seeks attorney looking for a prosperous challenge, ready for your close-up on national television? Are you zealous with a side of keen?
Oh, yes.
Show the world who you are with. Or who you are, with your, I don't get it, with your original creativity, extraordinary expertise, confident ingenuity, and then, you know, you got to have qualifications, trustworthy, honest, passion-driven, etc. Epic opportunity awaits. Sarah Boone, number 2005623, Orange County Corrections Department. I mean, it's pretty clever as far as marketing goes. But, it's clever. It doesn't mention that she drove off the other 8 attorneys, that they're going to be stepping into a whole world of
crazy
messiness.
Yeah. They took this and they went to a courthouse and they found attorneys and they said, here you go. Look at this and tell us what you think. And they're like, well, I ain't never heard of this person. And I'm like, where have you been? Under a rock? But on here it also says you have to basically have client inclusion at all times. Remember, she's the one that walks out of the room. But these people, these attorneys, were looking at this going, heaven's sakes, and they had to file it. You see right up here, it's filed with Tiffany Russell, the clerk of the Circuit Court of Orange County.
Right.
And here's what she wrote him a letter to. There's a bunch of writing back here. This could probably be the description of the menu there, but she's basically wrote him a letter there. It's all in this green writing. And she said, have your people put it up in your break room at your law offices and stuff. I mean, the
entitlement is unbelievable.
She is just narcissist Nancy. I mean, but so we got all this going with her, and I think sometimes when people do this and show how smart they are, you know, you're not necessarily going to get an appeal, but this is going to be all appealable because it's just such a you-know-what show.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely messy. Well, we're going to continue to follow Sarah Boone. It's a fascinating case. She keeps it interesting, that's for sure. And like you said, it's probably creating a lot of legal ramajama that's going to keep it in the courts for some time. So thank you for the update on that.
You're welcome.
Now, are you ready to dive into this other super sad story? I know. So this episode is called Shot in the Face. Deputy Sean Grayson is now in hot water for killing Sonya Massey, a woman who called for help. So this is just out of Illinois. It's unbelievable to me. The sheriff's deputy, Sean Grayson, was working for the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office in the Springfield, Illinois area. This was July 6th, this incident happened. 36-year-old Sonya Massey, mother of two, calls 911. She thinks there may be a prowler outside of her house. So they send a couple of deputies. Grayson is one of them. These two officers go into her house, which you and I were talking. I thought that was odd as well. Like, well, the prowler's outside, or the report of the prowler, but maybe they just wanted to step in to talk to her. At any rate, the other officer with Grayson has body cam video, and it shows them basically going into her house and asking for her identification. And then as they're standing there, Grayson looks over, and they're in one room, but you can see that the other room is close by the kitchen. And he sees that there's water boiling on the stove. And he tells her, basically, go over there and turn that off or get that boiling water, already implying just in his tone that there's something inappropriate about her having that water on the stove. And so she walks over, and she's already kind of nervous, I feel like, watching that video. But anyway, she picks up the pot, and then he just starts treating her like she's picked up some kind of weapon and hollering at her and yelling at her. And the next thing you know, and she just is like, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And that seemed to just set him off. I mean, anyway, it just, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but he became very angry based on what we saw in this video. And he goes, you'd better effing not. I swear to God, I'll effing shoot you right in your effing face. And then he raised his gun. It's a 9mm. He yelled at her, drop the effing pot. She's nervous wreck. She's apologizing. She gets on her knees, and he point blank fires into her face and into her head. 3 shots are heard in the video. And then anyhow, he steps away, claims almost like he's implying that she's crazy, steps outside. Have we had any calls to this house before reporting of mental instability? And he was trying to say that she was going to throw that hot water at him, and this is all justified. And the community is up in arms. He's now been charged with murder. It's just unbelievable that it even got to this point in the first place. It's like he walked in intent on killing her to happen so quickly, so unreasonably.
Yeah. Well, let's just start at the beginning.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
All right. She's 36 years old, like you said. She's a little black lady. She weighs 110 pounds. Gosh. She is 5'1".
Not a threat physically.
He is 6'5", and he weighs 268 pounds.
Former military guy.
So she does call about a prowler, and of course, it's on the outside. So I'm going to call him, the guy that's with him, Deputy B. Okay, we got Grayson and Deputy B. So they get there and they walk around the house with their police flashlights, which show a lot. They're amazing how clear they are. So they're out there and they see a car next door, a black car or truck, and a window's broken out of it. So they do that first before they let her know that they're at her house. So they go up to the door and knock 5 times. You know how, when I heard how they knocked, if someone knocked on my door like that, I would be afraid.
Yes.
Especially one in the morning.
And if you're not expecting anyone.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of, stuff like that is important to me because you don't want to startle people. What's the point in that you're there, the lady, she's scared.
It's big dickery.
I guess it is. It exactly is that kind of energy, isn't it? So they're out there. So he's talking to her, and you can tell he's already a smart aleck because she's scared. She's got on a little duster type thing and lounge clothes. It's 1 a.m. So he comes up there and he's talking loud to her, and right in her face basically and over her. His head's just like that, like maybe 3 or 4 inches from the ceiling. And so when she wouldn't come to the door at first, so they have to call back to the station and get them to call. And so she comes to the door eventually and she goes, don't hurt me, don't hurt me. And he goes, why would we hurt you? You called us. Why would we hurt you? And then he said something else to her. And she said, thank y'all for... This is going to upset me. Thank y'all for being here. She said, I love y'all. And so he sees she's acting a little bit different. And he goes, "Are you okay mentally?" It was a one tender moment there for a second. And she said, yeah, I've taken my medicine and all that stuff. So he already knows that she has to be medicated. She's afraid. She's a woman there by herself. Well, Deputy B is still looking around the house outside. So they go inside. They go in there, big old guy and her. So they're in there, Grayson and her in there, and she's sitting down on her little couch in the living room. She's got her little Bible. They're saying, "I need your ID." I mean, they went to her house. So she's looking through the Bible. A lot of us keep important papers in our Bible. I don't keep my ID there, but, she did, I think. So Officer B comes in a little bit after that, and she finds this. So during all that, she's nervous. They're just in her house there. She's nervous. She thinks there's a prowler. So he looks over on the stove over there and goes, "Hey, turn that off. Last thing we need here is a fire," or something to that effect. So she scurries over there to do it. And so typically, police don't send someone in a room that's got knives in it, and they typically don't necessarily worry about what's on the stove. We've all boiled water. It doesn't necessarily catch on fire, So it's just him trying to move her around. He moved her from outside on the porch to the couch, holding her Bible here, there, and everywhere. So over there, Officer B is the only one with his body cam on. This guy, Grayson doesn't have his body cam on, but he's in the lead and he's bigger. Officer B, in my opinion, is holding back, standing back. So she's over there and she's moving the pot. You have to pick it up. It's not a pot like this one. It's got two little handles. Pick it up. So when she turns around, it's maybe steaming or stuff, and he kind of backs up, over gesticulates and over moves. And she said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Away from your hot, steamy pot." And she said, "Where are you going?" And so he said it again, and she said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." And he said, "Huh?" And so she said it again.
Got angry.
It made him mad. She had her Bible.
She wasn't showing up for respect to him.
Mm-mm. And she was calling on the name of Jesus.
Yeah, I know. No, I think she was showing plenty of respect.
Yeah. Oh,
she was afraid of him, and she was a woman of faith, and she was rebuking the fear and the vibe that she got in that room.
Well, so he had his hand on his gun when she was over there. His hand's on it the whole time. You can see it with Officer B. And he's on there, and then he's got her scurrying. I mean, she's scared to death.
A wreck.
Yeah. And so he has his gun up like this, and she's moving to take the pot over there. She is on her knees with the pot basically up where her face is and goes, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." All this makes me so mad.
It's sick.
It really makes me so mad because people that misuse authority and it, I mean, you see, what do you want the lady to do? Grovel and die?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It sounds like there was nothing she could have done to avoid this. He was trying to make it happen.
Oh, yeah. He came in there with an attitude. This guy, they had found out later, he had worked in 6 different places in 4 years, all of them law enforcement.
And previous complaints of abuse of authority.
Right. And he got let go from the military for that. And he had 2 DUIs. And so all that had happened. And this is exactly what we're talking about up there in Massachusetts. They're not vetting folks and looking at them. There's certain people that don't need to do certain jobs if they've got a temperament that is not agreeable.
You're a dick.
Yeah.
Don't be in law enforcement.
That's right. With a gun.
Right.
So basically he's real angry. He came to her house mad. And you know what stirred this up in me? I got to thinking, why is this? I cried when how easy I cry. But I cried and it upset me. And I was like, this is wrong when I saw it. Because this happened on July the 6th. So while all this is going on, there's fireworks going off because people still have some fireworks.
Adding to the stress of the whole situation.
And the lady, it's dark there. Her kid, she has a 17-year-old son and another child also, but they obviously weren't home. So these 2 big men are in her house, and she thinks they're there to help her.
God love her, she called 911 for help.
Yep.
She didn't say, "Let me put some boiling water on there and maybe he'll ask me to move it and I'll have an opportunity to throw it on his 6'5" self."
Yeah, and I'm 110 and he's 268. And I mean, we don't have to ask people if we can boil water in our own home when they come in. There's several things. He didn't de-escalate it at all. He could have gone over there and turned it off, for one. He could have quit that loud talking like that to her. He could have talked softly to her. if he couldn't handle it, he got to move out of the way, let Officer B, who has a much more pleasant countenance, deal with it, or go outside. I mean, he came in there like hell on wheels with her.
Well, according to the reports that I read, that was his normal way of doing business. Like, he continued to be a bully, is how he was described. There was another woman that I guess he had arrested, she and her boyfriend, and it was believed that she had drugs hidden in her body, and he was trying to make her remove these drugs in front of him, and she kept refusing, saying, I know my rights and I want to go to the hospital. So he denies going to the hospital, but she said he followed them to the hospital and barged in the room when she was working with medical staff to remove these drugs. So it just sounds like he does what he wants when he wants, and he's not going to be told anything. And I even wondered how much he hates women. But again, that's just superficial, just a little bit that I've read.
Seemed like he hates everybody.
Yeah,
because he went in there, he had his hand on his gun while they were talking. When I was going back and forth from Birmingham to Pensacola, Brookside police pulled me over one night on one of the skinny roads.
I remember how upset you were. And boy, were you right on about that, because as we know, Brookside blew up, made national news because they were basically building up a law enforcement based on false tickets. They were, anyway, we can get into that, but you experienced it before the story broke, and you were absolutely right on.
Yeah, and so that's what's coming up in me is the feelings, because that officer, there was nowhere for me to pull over. And where I grew up, my mother had told me never stop in Brookside.
Right, it's mountainous, first of all. It's like sharp, steep inclines right like off the road.
Ravines on each side. So I had my flashers on, doing like her, anything I can. Flashers on, held my phone like this, going 8 miles an hour and showing them, have my light on in my car. And so finally I got to somewhere where I could pull over. And the guy came up to my window like that, and he put his hand on his gun, unsnapped it, put his hand on his gun, put the other hand in my car and leaned in and was yelling at me so much that spittle was coming on my face. And I told him, I said, you can back up out of my car. But I was scared, but it scared me to death. I called my boss, Johnny, and asked him to come toward me, because I felt it was wrong, because I wasn't their typical person that they stopped, but we're already there. So anyway, he had stopped me and screaming like that, hand on the gun and stuff, and then finally told me that I better be glad that I stopped, because there were 5 police cars this way and 5 that way, and they were all armed. Basically, and he was screaming at me saying, when I tell you to pull over, or next time I light you up, you better pull over. And I told him, I said, I will not do that, because I will not pull over. And I was calling 911 at the same time too. So all that, but you get in that and you're scared to death. So when I saw her, look at him, when he unsnapped that and put that gun toward her like that. And when I saw her with that pot, and she, I'm sorry. What does she have to be sorry for? I'm so mad, I can't stand it.
Apparently she just has to apologize for being alive and living and calling for help.
Yeah. And so this guy, the Officer B's back there, he's not saying anything. This is what upsets me about things. They both got guns. You could have said, if you were scared of the big old guy, he was nowhere near that big old guy's size. But you could say, hey, something to stop their brain, because he was in a fit to kill type of thing.
Absolutely.
He said, I'm killing somebody
In
tonight.
my opinion, that's exactly how it
And it's going to be
across.
this little lady right here in her own house on the floor.
And he was already setting it up by saying, are you okay? And hopefully that was, like you said, a moment of tenderness and a genuine question. I mean, and to play devil's advocate, I know that they deal with people in their worst every single day, law enforcement. And a lot of it is mental illness, and you don't know what to expect. But you don't walk in and aggravate a situation if that's truly what you think. You would have stayed out there on the porch with her, where other officers and other people are.
Right. And very rarely is excessive force or use of force the number one thing you do. He could have backed up even more and not taking it so personally. Have you not lived anywhere where people call on the name of Jesus?
Well, that's actually a great observation. I do feel like people in authority, whether it's law enforcement or politicians or maybe people who are just bosses in general who have a little bit of power in a situation, if you say anything that pushes back, then maybe they're in these leadership positions for all the wrong reasons, because it becomes very personal very quickly. Well, how dare you question me? How dare you not do what I say?
Yeah.
No matter how I say it, you should do what I say because I said it.
And I think because after he shot her, some of the other people that were higher up than him, they came in and they said, "Where's the gun?" He said, "There's not one." He said, "She was going to throw hot water on me, and she rebuked me in the name of Jesus." And they're all standing there like, "Are you kidding me? You had a taser, you have a backup, you outweigh her 2.5 to 1, and you decided to shoot her straight under her left eye to come out the top of her neck and 2 more in her head, and that's how you chose to deal with this?" And so when he went outside, there's about a dozen officers that are horseshoe-shaped out the door going, "What happened here?" So they're there, and he walks out, and he goes, he's before that, he calls back to the dispatch and goes, "Have we had any other calls?" Basically crazy calls about her. So he's trying to set that up and set the narrative. Then he goes out and he goes, "That effing is crazy." And all of them are standing around like, "Are
Shocked.
you kidding me?"
Because he hadn't been working for them very long either.
Yeah.
You know, so they're probably doubly shocked. Like, we don't really know this guy. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. Who is this person that works for us? Well, I thought it was interesting too that Deputy B was like, "Shouldn't we stop the bleeding? Shouldn't we try to help her?" And he all but says, "Let her bleed out." Like, he just didn't give a crap.
Oh, yeah. He says that. And then before he says that, he goes, "It's a headshot. She's gone." Like he's proud of it. Like he shot a stag or something.
Just no empathy, no looking at her like she was a human being, just somebody in his way that offended his ego.
Yeah. I mean, that could have been my sister, my mother, my aunt, my cousin, you, me, anybody in their own house because they're boiling water for whatever, tea, spaghetti, whatever, soup.
Just she wanted a bowl of water. Who cares? It's her house. Yeah.
And so all of it just went bad real fast.
No
but
kidding.
I wonder, why couldn't this other man at least say something loud to stop it?
Well, that takes me right back to George Floyd. We have the video of that guy proudly sitting on his neck and holding him down. And then you have the other officers that just stood there. And I think to some extent there's this fraternity and this brotherhood. And just like you would in any situation, whether it's law enforcement or not, if you're around other coworkers or other people, there's probably this feeling of what's appropriate to do. How do I respond? And maybe this questioning of, this person's my superior, or this person is, nobody that I should be, he doesn't answer to me, how do I even jump into this? But I think you and I are of the opinion you speak up no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
And then there are those, especially if they're in some sort of a position like law enforcement where there's a hierarchy of authority, maybe they feel like they don't have any say.
Sometimes you don't. But if you're doing wrong, I'm not going to stand there and co-sign with you, and I'm going to act like it's the coolest, funniest thing ever.
And those other officers in the George Floyd case sure found that out the hard way. They all got their comeuppance as well.
And Chauvin's in jail, and he'll find out how authority feels with him. To me, the mark of a person that is a decent person and a good leader and someone that I feel like has the good spirit and essence about them is if you have all that authority, yet you can be kind about it and not necessarily misuse it. That takes a very good person.
Yeah, somebody who's actually in it for all the right reasons. And I do know so many police officers who are in it for the right reasons.
We have plenty.
And they take so much abuse from people, just verbally, and then their lives are on the line. You truly never know what you're going to come up against, especially with all the drugs that we have and how people get out of their minds. But when you do misuse that authority and it becomes national news, it starts these conversations. And it kind of irritates me sometimes when you have so many people just immediately go to the defense of the police saying, well, they just feel persecuted. They can't ever do anything right. And I'm like, well, it's because of situations like this. And really, it's not even about law enforcement. Whatever job you may be in, if there is no accountability for you as a chef and you're feeding people bad food, eventually it's going to catch up with you. If you're doing any kind of a job and if you're, like say there was some bad journalist that I'd worked with years ago and they were making stuff up, eventually that's going to catch up with you. So whoever you are and whatever you're working in, the bad apples sometimes ruin the whole bunch, but it shouldn't be that we can't not have the conversation because the rest of you feel persecuted.
Yeah. Well, it shouldn't be that we can't walk around in our own house letting water boil over there if we want to, because I've had guns aimed at me. Being a pharmacist, I have. And that I've just been so paralyzed. I've quit one place that I worked. Every time somebody come around being loud or something, it's kind of traumatic. And what you have to think, smart people know when you point a gun at someone and put your finger on the trigger, that person's probably going to die. So all this waving guns around and acting like all that stuff.
Like a cowboy.
I understand why. I don't want policemen getting shot either, But what we can't do is go, well, they were breaking the law, or I turned into the, fire chief all of a sudden and decided that water's going to get the house on fire. He wanted to run her house, and he didn't like it that that's her house, and she stirred up his demons when she called on Jesus, and
I think
he
that's
didn't
probably
like
right.
it.
Yeah, I agree. I hear you on that. Well, I am glad that his department held him accountable, though, and he was charged with murder.
Oh, yeah. And he was arrested. Then he started kind of crying around and being, this, that, and the other.
He's the victim.
Now he wants pretrial release because he says, I need to go get married to my fiance. So it's not, you're going to go over there and mess up that girl's life now. You done mess up this lady's life and all her family.
Why do you get a chance to go marry your fiance when you just robbed her for a chance to live?
Yeah, well, I mean, and also the ladies, she don't want to marry somebody that did that and be doing all that stuff right now.
That's a whole...
Yeah, well, that's on her if it is.
Yeah.
But then, okay, so people had known about the prowler, and her family was asking who shot her. For 24 hours, they didn't know it was this guy.
Because they were trying to do damage control.
Exactly. And they let them labor under a multiplicity of disarranged ideas, basically a lie, that a prowler shot her. So they're walking around for 24 hours not knowing it.
That's the kind of thing that makes you think they don't even really care that they have bad apples in the bunch.
And people were just holding it back and stuff. Her family was entitled to know. Her daddy has just had 4 bypasses. And he said, this child right here called me every day and said it just like this, Daddy, I love you. He said, that's the last thing she had said to me. And he said, my pre-heart, the heart I had before, could not have taken this. And he said, this one's barely taking it right now. So he's with Ben Crump. They have pulled Ben Crump in all this, and Ben Crump is making people answer to him.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that there's national attention on this, because these conversations need to happen. We do need to hold people accountable. This is who we call for help. Exactly. She called them for help, and they put her in the ground, in a grave. And then he wants to say he needs time to go get married. Yeah. Well, he can piss off as far as I'm concerned.
He can go. Who he reminds me of is like, that song that says Bubba shot the jukebox because he got mad about a song on there. He just came in there like a big old Bubba and decided I want to know what kind of thinking makes you think.
Mental instability, some sort of antisocial.
Right. She's the person that she fell on her own sword and said, yes, I've taken my medicine. And she really didn't have to answer all that to him either. I wonder if he took his. Well, apparently he didn't, or he needs some. So there's many different things he could have done to de-escalate that. Her daddy said, just like I think, he's an emissary of Satan.
So what's happening now with his, do we know what the next steps are?
Well, right now they will go through the things of court and stuff. They're also looking at videos and 911 and the body cams and taking interviews and stuff. So this is a case that will develop as we go.
All right. We'll just continue to follow it like we do a lot of these other cases. Well, Pam, I appreciate you bringing this one to our attention and making it so we could talk about it here on Gulf Coast Confidential, because I do think it's important. We talk about so many cases where we speak up on behalf of the victim, and it is tragic when the victim is a victim because of law enforcement. It's the exact opposite of what you expect to get when you call for help.
Yeah. And I almost want to pull him out of the mix and go, even they are ashamed and embarrassed for him. Because that is not our typical experience, and that's not typical law enforcement.
Absolutely. I know plenty of officers who are literally up in arms over behavior like this, because it does give the rest of them a bad name, and they do work hard, and they do care about people and do try to do what's right for folks.
Yeah.
So.
It's just so sad, and it's a cautionary tale. And like I said, I've had it happen to me. Have a gun right in my face, and been scared to death of it. And we shouldn't have to be like that.
No, absolutely not. Awesome. Well, Pam, thank you so much for joining us. And we thank you for listening in and watching us on this episode of Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher, Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to our director, editor, and production engineer, James Roy. And remember, you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. channel, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.